The word of the Lord had come to all Israel. Samuel the prophet was their voice. He warned them. Their wickedness had angered God. Repentance was their only path to salvation, yet their hearts remained hardened, their minds clouded with sin. They paid little heed to the warnings. The Israelites had strayed from the path of righteousness. They embraced idolatry. They turned away from the one true God. Samuel, with a heavy heart, delivered the divine pronouncements. He foresaw the darkness that was soon to engulf them. His words echoed in the hearts of the faithful few, but they were drowned out by the clamor of the wicked. The Philistines, a powerful and ruthless enemy, were encroaching upon Israel's borders. They sensed weakness. They smelled fear. The Israelites, once mighty warriors, were now a shadow of their former selves. Their hearts were divided. Their spirits were broken. They were ripe for conquest. Samuel's warnings became more urgent. The Philistine threat loomed large. He implored the Israelites to turn back to God. He reminded them of their covenant, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. The Philistines were a formidable foe. They were skilled warriors. They were masters of ironworks, giving them superior weapons. Their armies were vast and well-equipped. They had conquered many nations. They were hungry for more. Word reached the Israelite camp. The Philistines were advancing. Their numbers were overwhelming. Fear gripped the hearts of even the bravest soldiers. The time for repentance was over. The time for battle was at hand. The Israelite army, though numerous, was ill-prepared. Their hearts were not in the fight. Their faith had waned. They lacked the resolve that had once made them invincible. They were no match for the disciplined and determined Philistine war machine. The Israelites trembled at their approach. The two armies clashed on the battlefield. The noise was deafening. The earth trembled beneath the weight of their charge. The Israelites, their hearts filled with dread, fought with little conviction. They were no match for the Philistine fury. The Philistines, fueled by their bloodlust and their confidence, cut through the Israelite ranks like a hot knife through butter. Blood stained the ground crimson. The cries of the wounded filled the air. Defeat came swiftly and decisively. The Israelites were routed. Thousands lay dead on the battlefield. The survivors fled in terror. They sought refuge in their nearby city, Shiloh. In their desperation, the elders of Israel came up with a plan.
We will bring the Ark of the Covenant to the battlefield.
The Ark of the Covenant was the most sacred object in Israel. It was a symbol of God's presence among his people. It was housed in the tabernacle in Shiloh, under the watchful eyes of Eli, the high priest, and his sons, Hophni and Phinehas. When the elders arrived in Shiloh with their request, Eli was aghast. He knew that the Ark was not a magical talisman. He understood that God's presence could not be manipulated. He tried to reason with them.
Please do not take the Ark. It is not a weapon to be wielded at will. God's presence cannot be summoned like a mere tool.
But his words fell on deaf ears. Hophni and Phinehas, corrupt and wicked men, shared none of their father's piety. They saw the Ark as a means to an end. They encouraged the elders in their folly. And so the Ark was loaded onto a cart, and a procession of priests and soldiers accompanied it to the battlefield. News reached the Philistine camp that the Israelites had brought their God to the battlefield. At first, they were afraid. The Philistines were a superstitious people. They had heard tales of the God of Israel and his mighty deeds. They feared his power.
But we have defeated the Israelites once. We can do it again. We will not be intimidated by a wooden box. We will fight with even greater ferocity. We will crush the Israelites and their God.
The Israelites, emboldened by the presence of the Ark, were filled with a renewed sense of hope. They believed that God would fight for them, that he would deliver them from their enemies. They had forgotten that God helps those who help themselves. The stage was set for a final confrontation. The two armies clashed in a maelstrom of steel, fury, and despair. The Israelites, their initial burst of confidence fueled by the presence of the Ark, were soon overwhelmed by the Philistine war machine. The Philistines, fighting with the fury of cornered animals, cut through the Israelite ranks like a scythe through wheat. The Israelite soldiers, realizing that the Ark had not brought them the divine intervention they had hoped for, panicked. They broke ranks and fled. The Philistines pursued them relentlessly, cutting them down as they ran. The ground was littered with the bodies of the slain. The stench of death filled the air. The Philistine soldiers, sensing victory, fought with even greater ferocity. They showed no mercy. They took no prisoners. Their swords drank deep of Israelite blood. The day belonged to them. The ark, once a symbol of God's presence and power, now stood as a silent witness to the carnage. The Philistines, flushed with victory, turned their attention to the ark. They had heard tales of its power. They believed it to be a powerful talisman. They decided to take it as a spoil of war. They approached the ark cautiously, wary of its power, but when nothing happened, they grew bolder.
Rip aside its veil and see what it holds.
They ripped aside its veil, revealing its contents, the 2 stone tablets on which the 10 Commandments were inscribed. They did not understand the significance of these tablets, but they knew that they had captured something important. The Philistines loaded the ark onto a cart and took it back to their own land. They placed it in the temple of their god Dagon as a trophy of their victory. They believed that they had captured the God of Israel. They would soon learn how wrong they were. The capture of the ark sent shockwaves through the remaining Israelites. Back in Shiloh, Eli, the high priest, awaited news of the battle. He was old and blind, but his faith was strong. He knew that the ark was not a magic charm. He prayed for God's mercy, whatever the outcome of the battle might be.
The battle. It was a disaster. The Israelites have been defeated. The ark has been captured by the Philistines.
The ark? Captured?
Eli, upon hearing this news, collapsed and died. He had lived a long life. He had served God faithfully. But the news of the ark's capture was more than his frail body could bear. The loss of the ark was a tragedy for Israel. But it was a personal tragedy for Eli. He had failed in his duty to protect the sacred object entrusted to his care. The news of the defeat at Ebenezer and the capture of the ark spread throughout Israel like wildfire. People wept openly in the streets. They tore their clothes in mourning. They shaved their heads in grief. The nation was in shock. They could not believe what had happened. How could God have allowed this to happen? How could he have allowed his ark to be captured by the Philistines? Was he no longer with them? Had he abandoned them to their enemies? These questions tormented the Israelites. They had lost their way. They had turned their backs on God. And now it seemed he had turned his back on them. The Philistines, emboldened by their victory, continued to harass the Israelites. They raided their towns and villages, they stole their livestock, they killed their men and took their women and children captive. The news of the ark's capture reached Phinehas's wife. She was pregnant and near her time. The shock of the news sent her into labor. She gave birth to a son, but her joy was short-lived.
Ichabod, the glory has departed from Israel.
She named her son Ichabod, which means the glory has departed from Israel, a testament to the tragedy that had befallen her people and her family. She died in childbirth, her heart broken by grief and despair. Hophni and Phinehas, those corrupt and wicked priests, had also died in the battle. They had paid the ultimate price for their arrogance and their disregard for God's laws. But their deaths brought no solace to the Israelites. The damage had been done. The house of Eli, once a symbol of piety and righteousness, lay in ruins, and the Ark of the Covenant, the symbol of God's presence, was gone. The capture of the Ark of the Covenant marked a turning point in Israelite history. It was a time of great national and spiritual crisis. The Israelites had hit rock bottom. They had lost everything. Their army had been destroyed. Their land had been ravaged. Their God, it seemed, had abandoned them. The story of the Ark's capture is a cautionary tale. It is a reminder that God is not to be trifled with. It is a reminder that disobedience has consequences. It is a reminder that even the most sacred objects cannot save us from ourselves. But it is also a story of hope. For even in their darkest hour, the Israelites did not give up on God. They knew that they had sinned. They knew that they had brought this upon themselves. And so they began the long and difficult journey of repentance and renewal.